Hi, I'm Eric Orange with the Reservoir Alliance of Burlington County, and today we're going to look at a short presentation on William Rogers House and Mill, which is located in Rancocas State Park in West Hampton Township. So in January of 2017, Gary Nelson came to Marissa Bozarth and I with an article from the Mount Holly Herald, which he found that was written in 1924. And the article says, while at Mount Holly, the British destroyed the ironworks near the bridge on Pine Street upon learning that cannonballs and sheet iron for the Army kettles had been made there for the Army. They also destroyed the mill on the Millbrook Farm on Rancocas Road. And Gary asked us if we had ever heard of this, and we had not. So we started looking. If you're going to have a mill, you need a good steady stream of water for a mill pond. And here along Rancocas Road, leading to Rancocas, in between Mount Holly and Rancocas, there were a number of tributaries, a number of likely candidates. So we started to investigate a little bit, and we started to find a little bit more information. We found this in Shin's book about the Rogers family. My kindergarten teacher's name was Rogers. So, and Rogers, of course, is a very old name around here. But this is what that says. Tradition relates that the machinery of a grist mill was damaged and a brewery destroyed on the plantation of William Rogers near Rancocas. The farm is now owned by William E. McIlvaine. Rogers was a dispatch rider with the Patriot Army. So again, this gets really interesting. We've upped the ante a little bit now. Now they've destroyed a man's brewery. So they've certainly gone too far here. But we also have a new name to consider. And before we had the Mather family, and now they're saying the McIlvaine family and Rogers. So McIlvaine, Mather, and Rogers. So we eventually found a history of the Rogers family, and this is what the Rogers family has to say about their illustrious history. We also found other references to the incident the Rogers family history relates. William Rogers was an express rider and dispatch bearer in the war. He thwarted, notice in this rendition, he thwarted the attempt of the Hessian soldiers to destroy his grist mill, which stood on his plantation between Mount Holly and Rancocas, New Jersey, bordered on the front by the Shell Road, and that's Rancocas Road, used to be made of shells, and at the back by Rancocas Creek, so right along the creek. The place is known as the McIlvaine Farm. Here were also his distillery for Applejack and Cherry Bounce, and the factory for making cement from oyster shells. The manor house burned down in 1900, and that's from the Rogers family history. So they lay that out pretty succinctly there. Factory for making cement, so a lime kiln, a distillery, probably a brewery at the same time, and a manor house, which didn't burn down, he says, until 1900. So we also acquired this map, which shows the McIlvaine Mather property, which was by this time in the 19th century situated more on Rancocas Road, but it did show a mill pond, which certainly would have been a necessity for a mill. So we also considered 1930 aerial photos, which showed the modern farm. But there in the middle, you can see what was at one point the mill pond, just a grassy meadow type area by 1930. We also considered the historic atlas of J.D. Scott Centennial Atlas of 1876, and it shows where two tributaries come together right at the Mather McIlvaine property. So two modern, at that time, modern houses. But you can also see situated farther to the south, right along the creek, the Rancocas Creek almost, is certainly another structure that they show in that map. Uh, the 1859 Burlington County Atlas also shows a mill at that location right along the creek. And the 1849 map showing a mill pond and showing that it is owned at that time by a man named Henry Rogers. So we were pretty confident we had the right place. And if you can see, just to the east of the mill pond there is what ends up being a road off of Rancocas Road that comes back to the house with the significant curve to it, and the mill situated at the end of the pond. So this was certainly the place we were looking for. So we're looking for now finding it on a map and finding it in real life. Rancocas State Park runs from Timbuktu in the east uh, back to the New Jersey Turnpike in the west. So a lot of acres, a lot of room, a lot of trees, a lot of woods. And we were able to find, we were looking for the colonial home, the mill operation, the lime kiln, and a brewery or distillery, which would have obviously been operated in some kind of outbuilding. So one of the rangers we knew suggested that there was a pile of rocks out in the woods she was familiar with, and that we should go out there and look at it, that they could have something to do with the Rogers Mill and Farm operation. So Marissa and I went out into the woods in the rain and took pictures, and ended up not being the spot, not the spot we were looking for. So sometimes you have to um, expand what you're looking for. If you're looking for a house, maybe you're really not looking for a house, but a depression where a house used to be. I visited once Drury's Bluff in Virginia, and I was looking for a fort that was there from the Civil War along the James River that was protecting Richmond. And I remember walking around through these hills and on these hills, wondering where the fort was. And obviously, I was in the fort. The fort was made of dirt. It was an earthen fort, and there were dugouts where they had ammunition, things like that. But certainly not the impression I had in my head. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe something like F Troop or something of that nature. But uh, what I was really looking for was earthen mounds. And the first thing I came across when we did end up finding the right place was the dam. And one of the trails walks right across the dam. And it took me a second before I looked around and realized that, yeah, this was indeed an earthen dam, uh, part of it, certainly. So this picture is taken from basically inside the mill pond. So the earthen dam is maybe 8 feet tall at that point, and there would have been, just to the left in this picture, would have been where the wood mechanism would have been for raising and lowering the level of the pond. So it would have looked something very much like this. And we even found evidence along the dam where, in more modern times, they tried efforts at shoring up the dam, where there was timber laid across there with modern metal spikes to hold it in place. So we were pretty confident again that this was the site of the mill pond. And again, this picture, my shot at a panorama, shows the way the mill pond would have been, with the dam on the far right hand side where the mechanism would have been, then a raised area in the middle, and then to the left is where the mill race would have been. And that's what we see there. And this is a pretty good example uh, of about the same thing. You have the mill race, you have the the stream channel that flows out the mill pond, and we're pretty sure that it was an overshot wheel. and we did find evidence of that. So what else are we looking for? The same ranger that had the wrong location before did have the right location when we were looking for the lime kiln. So Kathy said she knew of a place where there were seashells. So we started looking around, and sure enough, just scattered on the ground were a number of seashells. And it wasn't odd to have a lime kiln in a farm operation. You needed lime for your fields, but they also would ship lime to places like Philadelphia, I'm sure, to use. And we have found evidence along the creek of large chunks of lime that are associated uh, with the boat we actually found out there. So we were pretty sure we had the right idea here uh, of what Rogers Millbrook Farm would look like with the pond. We found the house, the mill, and the lime kiln all in very close proximity to each other. But it probably would have looked something like that. And so we went out with metal detectors, and we started looking for what we would have considered the barnyard, about a 1 acre site to the north of the house. And here it's very small, but you can see the house is located towards the bottom of this map. It's a red square with a red circle in the middle. And we basically walked back and forth with a GPS and a metal detector, and wherever we found a lot of metal, we put it on the global positioning system so that we were able to map out where we thought, and we compared it to other parts of Rancocas State Park, and there was significantly more activity, more metal here near this house. Another one we found, and so we did find the remains of Rogers Manor House, and I don't know if you can quite make it out in there. Kind of hard to see there when we first discovered it. We ended up getting a few measurements. It's a 30 by 30 square, and that was I felt a little odd. I hadn't seen very many square houses. I always picture in my head certainly colonial houses as being rectangular, a little longer than they are deep. But this one is 30 by 30, and we have found a couple other examples recently of other uh, colonial houses that are 30 by 30. So not odd. Probably had a kitchen attached to it, a 1 story outbuilding, or maybe attached to the house on the eastern end of it. That's what it looked like. It was just completely covered there in October when we started working on it. But eventually we were able to clear away some of the weeds, and we were able to find the foundation again and make those measurements. So significant site out there in West Hampton Township in Rancocas State Park. Uh, we did make some progress over the course of a couple months getting everything cleared out. Um, so we were able to get the weeds out, but certainly the site needs to be interpreted. So that's what it looked like in October, and we were able to expose that stuff by December. And so then the question is, okay, you have a cool old farm, the Rogers Millbrook Plantation. So what? So what's interesting about that? Well, here's what's interesting about Rogers Place out on Rancocas Road. In June of 1778, the entire British Army, 15,000 strong, is moving from Philadelphia to New York. And it ends up that they come right through here, right through Burlington County. And on June 20th and 21st, they encamp in Mount Holly. And this is Major John Andre's map of the encampment here in Mount Holly. So this is where everybody was in and around Mount Holly. So what happens when you have 15,000 soldiers coming to dinner? You have to feed them. You have to find some way to feed them. And I'd always heard this story as a child growing up in Mount Holly about the British using the Quaker meeting house on Garden and High as a commissary. And they even have a pew that has the cleaver marks in it to prove it. So that was a story I'd always heard. I always thought that was, wildly interesting. And now we can put two and two together, and we can find out that just 2 miles away, you have the Rogers Millbrook Farm. And we actually know from a war damage claim filed in 1783 that the British Army paid Rogers Farm a visit. And all those things, the family history, except for the part about him thwarting the attempt by the Hessians, they were quite successful. The British did raid his farm, stealing personal items, destroying his mill, um, stealing his livelihood, and he filed this war damage claim, which was not paid. We think it was probably leverage against the British government in the peace talks at that time. There were over 500 of them, I believe, that were filed from New Jersey alone. And but it is interesting, and he writes that on June 20th in 1778, that the British did plunder and destroy. And he goes on to say there's a whole list with prices for things that they took. So 2 good horses, 1 good cow, 2 fat calves, 1 fat sheep, because stealing a skinny one would be silly. 6 pigs, 30 fowl, 1 bolting cloth, and that was for the mill, and 1 brass kettle, which we figure is probably for the distillery or the brewery. And then interesting, 1 wood flat. And there were witnesses that testified about seeing the burning of the wood flat. And this would have been a boat that Rogers used on the Rancocas for business. So again, part of his livelihood, and an idea of what that boat might have looked like. Saved the pirates and probably saved the swivel gun. But it was probably kind of like a rogue galley that had the capabilities of a sail. But we're not sure, even though we have found a boat recently on the Rancocas Creek that did have some lime associated with it. Very interesting. We'll get to that another time. Um, but so that's what was cool about William Rogers House and Mill. Not only is it still out there, it's in the state park in West Hampton Township, but it plays a part in the American Revolution. It's this interface between the civilians and this marauding army, this army that, again, 15,000 British soldiers pillaging and plundering their way across Burlington County. And, here's the story, here's this list, here's this place where it happened. So we're certainly hoping that we can um, get that site interpreted with some professional archaeologists and with the cooperation of the state park system. We're hoping that we can get some interpretive signs and things like that out there. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.